what would be indicative to a student that um, it might be time, from having just read books or magazines or seen DVDs and what have you, and websites, that it might be time for them, we'll notice some internal shift, to actually seek out a quote-unquote teacher,
Yeah.
as opposed to
Right.
sticking in through their eyes.
Right. That comes up a lot, and I don't know quite what to say it's indicative of. I think a lot of practice, Dharma practice, you can do it without having this ultimate. I think in a way people make too much of it. It's kind of like marriage, right? It's like, it's going to be the one and only, and it has to be Mr. Perfect. And that tends to make it a little problematic. And I think if people kind of naturally, I say all this even though it did happen to me that way. But love at first sight. But I think it just happens. And you can pursue it. It's good to expose yourself to as many teachers as possible and see what they're doing, and even do practices, and even do Vajrayana practices, although their intent is a kind of a guru yoga, but they still have other beneficial effects. And then eventually, what they say in the texts is, the one who somehow, from whatever technique shows you the nature of your mind, that's the one they call the root Lama. So sometimes that might take a long time, or sometimes it's immediate. And sometimes you don't even know if it's happened or not until you try out some other ones and go, wait a minute, I heard this back then, So I think it's very different. I don't think there's a particular thing, one way, I think we don't, the attitude that you have to sign your life away, kind of like making a pact or something, and it's a total end of all, teachers or something. I don't think that's conducive to the path, really, actually. At some point you have to have some instruction that's specific to you. I don't know how they do that when they have 10,000 students or something, but if that doesn't happen at some point, then you can't just book learn your way through it.
Why not?
Because you can't. First of all, it's not in the books. The real kind of. It's in the books, but if it's not tweaked by a teacher specifically, it's just very difficult to know which thing, which way to go, because there's so many choices. It's still ultimately your own choice every time. I do believe that, because nobody mostly knows your own experience, but it just still needs that kind of guidance and the little tips on how to proceed. Actually, I'm writing this whole definition of the word mengak in Tibetan, and it really is like, if you can read about it but you don't quite get it, and then someone says, well, why don't you just try this and see if that works. That's what that is, that instruction, and that's where you need a sort of relational thing.
Okay.
As well, of course. I'm suppose it's a big subject, but in Tibetan Buddhism, in Vajrayana, so much of the actual practice has to do with the relationship with the teacher. Like that relationship becomes the practice, it becomes the path, so they say, And I hate to admit that might be true, because in a way it excludes people who don't feel that they're in that kind of relationship, but it certainly is. We don't know that yet. So far in the whole history of Tibet, it's depended on that relationship.
On the one hand, there's the love at first sight, or Prince Charming.
Right. Yeah.
One penultimate person in the universe.
Right.
For you.
Right.
Versus more gradual or evolutionary.
That's right.
Kind of approach. But they both speak to this phenomenon of to have a teacher.
Right.
To have.
Right. To be able to say those words, my guru. Yeah.
Yeah, and because lately I've had talked to some people like, think such and such is going to be my teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Great, what does that mean to you? It's like,
Right.
so I'm curious from your perspective.
Yeah.
Just, what are,
Yeah.
not so much what does the phrase mean,
Right.
but what kinds of inquiry would benefit someone in approaching that issue?
I see. Right.
What could they be asking themselves? Like, as far, I guess, ultimately check motivation.
Yeah. Yeah. Motivation. It's hard to make kind of general statements. I'm kind of used to like what any particular individual person's stage where they might be, what I would say. Like somebody might be like projecting starry-eyed perfection on this like idol worship kind of thing. In which case I would say maybe you ought to be more independent or be more discriminating or something, and somebody else, so it depends. I think I don't have some absolute truth about that, but and as I said, I think it causes a lot of anxiety for people who think they're supposed to have the one guru and then they don't, and then on the other hand, that yearning for a teacher can make a very profound path itself, where that's looking for the guide, seeking for it. The point at which you say, I have a teacher, this has become something much more formalized in the West, I've been told by the Tibetan lamas or the Bhutanese lamas, where they get requested, will you be my teacher? That's sort of a new phenomena. They didn't particularly have someone, please be my teacher. And then that's sort of like a marriage or something. It happened if you request certain teachings, and eventually the relationship becomes no way out or something, and the devotion grows like that. And at the point, I guess it's up to the individual which point you say, this is my teacher, or an interesting thing I find too is when those lamas say that this so and so is my disciple, and I've heard quite a few of them mention somebody who's important as their disciple who might be really somebody else's. So I don't think it's quite as cut and dry as we want to make it, even though we get so much solace from that relationship, feeling like we're in this relationship, and eventually I think that the relationship does have to deepen. Or should, hopefully will deepen to the point where it's really felt to be, a relationship for the ages beyond one lifetime, way beyond. I think, like where it struck me one time, if I can tell this little story, I went into the 3-year retreat, and I was sort of madly in love with a guy when I went in, and suffering kind of from that. And then somewhere about halfway through the retreat, Kalu Rinpoche sent a letter in to everybody, there were 6 of us, and into each person got the letter, and it said, I'll be with you until you're enlightened. And it just struck me now, who can say that? What guy can say that? It was like so incredible, and it was absolutely like this amazing commitment that he was making, this cosmic commitment, and that did it for me. I mean, it had been done already, but that sort of realizing how profound that particular relationship is, and how much more profound than any other relationship, really. Because that's. So I think it does deepen that way, but I don't think there's a particular point. There is for some people though. They sign up. Will you be my teacher? And the lamas usually, yeah, sure. And
That's the cookie.
or. And then from then on they can say my teacher, and whether they use that in a ego supportive way or in a real more deeper way depends on the individual. Of course, it can be used as just a sort of
I'm in the right club.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and is my teacher better than yours, and whatnot. And I think one of the points that I have made in a few places, and I still can continue to contemplate, is that our culture doesn't have a paradigm for this. relationship. And so the paradigm we do have is generally a sort of personality worship, movie stars, rock stars, even like scholarly mentors, whatever. And so we tend to put that one on it because that's the one we have. And I'm not saying that may be more appropriate, I don't know, but I don't think it's what is the Vajrayana, guru-disciple relationship has ever been described as traditionally. That's just our take on it. And I think that's where some of the problems come in, actually. Talking about a different, we think we're in one relationship, and in fact, it's a different one.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.